Hello, everyone. Welcome to IPWatchdog Unleashed, where each week we journey into the world of intellectual property to discuss the laws, news, policy, and politics of innovation, technology, and creativity. With analysis and commentary from industry thought leaders and newsmakers from around the world, IPWatchdog Unleashed is hosted by world-renowned patent attorney and the founder of IPWatchdog.com, Gene Quinn, who has twice been named one of the most influential people in the intellectual property community and recognized numerous times as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Take it away, Gene.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of IPWatchdog Unleashed. This week, we're going to have a conversation with someone who's come a very long way to have this conversation with us in person. Lisa Jorgenson, Deputy Director of the World Intellectual Property Organization. We all know Lisa here in America because before she went to WIPO, she was Executive Director at the AIPLA, and before that, she was in corporate America as a Chief IP Counsel for a long time as well. It's great to have her join us at IP Watchdog Live over the last few days. And Lisa, it is great to have you here. Thank you for being here today.
Gene, thank you so much. It's really fun to be back, and I'm looking forward to this. It's great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too because, as you know, I'm a big fan of WIPO. I don't just say that, I actually mean it. I think you guys do great work. But before we get into the great work that you're doing now and what you see maybe happening in the future, I thought it would be interesting to start with a little get to know you. And everybody does know you already. So maybe the question is, how did you find your way to WIPO? Maybe we start the story there. Because a lot of people in our industry are never going to have the opportunity to go through these processes to, whether they get to work at the patent office or you get appointed as a judge or you wind up finding yourself on the international stage really as a part of the United Nations. It seems to me that would be very exciting for a patent person.
It really is very exciting, and I've really enjoyed my time so far at WIPO. But how I got there, coming from ST Microelectronics, spending about 25 years in-house and running an IP department, is kind of how I got to AIPLA. I was on the board of directors at AIPLA, on the board at IPO, then the USPTO management, so it was Andre Iancu, and I'd gotten to know each other at that time, and AIPLA gave me the opportunity to do some work on the Hill as well. And so the breadth of that experience is what enticed Andre to talk to me to say, would you have an interest in going to WIPO as the Deputy Director General? And that's really how I got there, was having that discussion and thinking about it and saying, yes, I think that would be great. I'd love to move to a position where I can support a lot of work from an international phase or an international stage, helping both developed countries and developing countries increase or find a way to support their own national IP systems, and supporting a lot of the stakeholders in so many different countries.
Just to be clear, and this makes sense, I guess, when you say it out loud, right? With the director of the patent office is the president's, whoever the president is and whoever the director is the president's chief IP advisor. That's in the statute, and I actually think that's probably true for the presidents who care to know what's going on, right? Or somebody in the administration that is at the arm of the president, picking people. So the process is the director recognizes somebody or approaches and kind of vets and then lays it out for the president to say, okay, who out of this group do you want us to send to WIPO?
Right. Well, I think back then WIPO was probably a little bit more under the radar than it is today, in all honesty. I do understand that there were multiple people that had been on the table being considered back when I was first considered. But they relied on Andre's decision on who he wanted to put over there, and that's who got put forth for, I think at the time it just went to the Vice President Pence for final approval. But it went through the State Department, went through the Commerce Department, and then up to Vice President Pence.
Yeah, that's got to be an exciting process to go through all of that, I would think. Kind of
surreal.
It's
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I bet. It's probably a little surreal too, well, maybe not for you because you've held so many high level positions over the years and been in a lot of rooms that a lot of other people weren't in. And I like the way that you said very modestly, AIPLA give you the chance to go up to the Hill. I think it did probably a lot more than that. You were probably in a lot of meetings and negotiations on behalf of the industry and everything, and I know I really appreciate it. And I have a little bit of an idea of what that's like because I became really close with Todd Dickinson, who was there before you were. And so I know what that position entails. And it's the director of the AIPLA is an exciting position in and of itself.
Yeah, it really is. It gives a chance to work with a lot of different kinds of stakeholders, a lot of different industries, a lot of different size corporations, all the way to individual inventors. You know, at AIPLA, they have so many great committees that do a lot of the work for the industries. And then to translate that to going up to the Hill and trying to sell the concepts of what is important to the AIPLA members.
So let me ask you this, because you've had a few different positions in corporate America, very high-ranking person in the IP area for a very long time, right? I mean, you were chief IP counsel.
I was group vice president at ST in charge of the IP.
Okay, so you're top person in a large corporate entity. Then you are at AIPLA, which is now you've got not just one boss, you got like the whole industry seems to be your boss. And now you're at WIPO, and we can get into what it is you're doing at WIPO, but it seems to me that there are a lot of those skills that would translate across the board are useful in each setting, but they do strike me as different settings. You've sort of been, I wouldn't say chameleon, because that seems like I think sometimes maybe that word has a negative connotation, but it does seem to me that you've been able to take what you've learned from various stops and morph it into really doing these jobs very, very well. How would you say it?
Well, thank you for that. I do think that all along the way, you pick up additional skills, and you use the skills that you've learned. So the skills that I learned at ST Micro, managing groups of people all around the world. So it was an international IP department, but also learning the HR side, the finance side, and bringing that all into an organization like AIPLA. You add the skills of working on with various people on the Hill, working more closely with the USPTO, but also then picking up the working closely with the JPO, the Japanese Patent Office, the EPO, KIPO, what was KIPO is now MOIP, and of course in China, as well as a number of other IP offices around the world. You start to pick up those skills and you figure out what they want, what they need, all along the way kind of translating what the USPTO wants and what the US stakeholders want as you get into all of that various other kinds of work.
Yeah. It just, as we were just having this conversation, it just struck me that, like when you're working for a corporate entity, there's one set of goals and everybody's moving in the same direction. Internally, you have conversations, probably different points of view, but at the end of the day, the corporation is going to go in a direction that's best for the corporation. Then you go to AIPLA. Everybody, again, I think whether we agree, disagree, call them pro-patent, anti-patent, whatever, everybody wants a better innovation system in the U.S. Then you translate that. Now you go into a UN agency where not everybody is on the same team. And there is real competition between, right now, the United States and China, global competitiveness, right? How does that translate? I mean, it seems like you go from everybody's on the same page to now you're almost like herding cats.
Well, in some respects, it is herding cats. You have 194 member states that you can say, 194 board members, right, and 158 in just the PCT itself. But the work that we do in the patents and technology sector, we do it from a very neutral standpoint. We're not there to sell a concept. We're there to support a service to the stakeholders, to the IP offices, to the sole inventors, up to the large corporations. So the work that I'm doing in the patent and technology sector at WIPO is to help sort of evolve the PCT in a way that works for everybody, and along the way making sure that we look at what is the U.S. stakeholders need as well. So the U.S. is a very large user of the services from WIPO. And so we want to be sure that they have the opportunity to work with us, that they come in and support their concepts of what they want done at WIPO. And the same is true for our patent and technology law department. We offer services through legislative assistance to a lot of developing countries. We don't dictate to them what they should or should not do. We work with them with their national IP strategies and their patent policies to say, what is it that you want in your economy at this point in time? And then we will tailor make the legislative advice that we can offer to you and work with you so that you can create the kind of patent policy and the national IP strategy that you want to have in your country. But along the way, we're looking for countries like the U.S. to come in with us and help us provide the best services that we can provide to these developing countries. As an example, we go in and train examiners in a lot of the developing countries. But we have a very small team inside WIPO, so how do we do that? We bring in the experts from the EPO, the JPO, MOIP, and we're looking for experts also from the U.S., not so that we can go in and say, here's what you have to do. It's, here are your options. If you want to emulate your IP department or your IP office, your examiners, do you want to emulate the EPO? Great, here you go. If you want to emulate the U.S., we've got the experts in from the U.S. to help them learn what the U.S. does or the USPTO does. Same thing for Japan, mostly from the larger developed country offices come in with us as we provide the patent examination training. We do the same thing with patent attorney training, where we teach them how to draft applications. Do you want it to look like how the U.S. Attorneys draft their applications? Do you want it to look like what's done in Europe or Japan? What is going to fit for your country? And we can come in and help you with that kind of capacity building and training.
So I guess, I didn't know that. I thought I knew what WIPO did, and I kind of did, and I kind of do. But it was the other day I heard you describe what you just described here to somebody. The light bulb went on for me a little bit more, because I thought WIPO would come in and tell countries that didn't know what they needed. Here's what we think you should do, and here's the laws. We can help you with this, and we can help you with that. It seems like it's much more going to like a buffet. One from column A, one from column B, one from column C, and you can mix and match. And you don't go in with any preconceived notions about what they should do. You listen, and you listen to what they want to accomplish and what their culture is, and not only what they want to accomplish, what they think they can actually accomplish. And then you put together a package that, in a lot of respects, is very unique to those countries.
Everything we do is tailor-made to what a country tells us their goal is. We'll go in and look at their economic situation, their legal situation. Do they have a judiciary that will ultimately want to look at managing patent cases? A lot of small countries are never going to get there, or they won't get there for many years to come. So they may not need that kind of support. If they do, though, we can bring that into the mix. We can bring in the concepts of IP enforcement, any number of other ways or other services that we can provide that go beyond just the PCT registry itself. We work across the sectors at WIPO. So we might work with the trademark team, we might work with IP enforcement, we could work with the design team, and we may all come together to say, let's offer a single package of services that we can provide to that country and help them with whichever direction they want to go. So yes, it is a bit of a smorgasbord. You have options, and then we help them decide from the options they tell us that they want, well, here's the package that you may want to consider.
Let me pivot just a minute, or maybe it's not even a pivot. It may just be a slight directional change here by a degree or two, because your job is also one that is different than what I thought it was originally when I heard that you had taken this position. And I guess I just thought WIPO was all about policy, and it's WIPO is an organization just like everybody else that needs to run their operations. And you really are, not that you're not involved in the policy stuff, but you're the operations person. You're like, would it be fair to say COO or Vice President of Operations? How would you characterize where you fit in your role at WIPO?
Well, I would characterize it as mostly a COO type function. We have the PCT, so it's the registry that brings in about 76% of the income to the organization. Overall, the registries bring in close to 90 6 or so percent of our income. So the member states' contributions to WIPO is minimal. It's only 3-4% of the total income. So at PCT, we're looking at really evolving the PCT, what's going to work. So things like color drawings. We're going to be working on color drawings, trying to allow people to submit that for patent applications. I've worked since I got there under Darren Tang on changing the culture of the organization so that we are much more customer-centric, so that every decision we make, everything we do has the customer in mind. We are working on right now a strategic plan for PCT marketing, so the outreach, the promotion of the PCT. We are working on changing our operations, our examiners in operations, from purely looking at the applications that come in from an application by application process, converting them to an applicant-driven process or a knowledge provider. We're training our examiners up to be able to handle some of the basic PCT legal issues. And the example I give is if you have a large corporation that's using a lot of PCT or a law firm, and you have paralegals across the organization or across the law firm filing PCT applications, they may understand something incorrectly. They may be making the same mistake again and again. So if we have an applicant-driven process, we have a person that's going to be responsible for saying, hey, wait a minute. If we can correct this mistake at this corporation or that law firm, it saves you time and money, saves us time and money, and it's better for them all across the playing field. One comment I had was, but don't you create conflicts of interest by having a person in operations responsible for an entity? And maybe if we did substantive examination, that might be the case. But we don't do substantive examination. So for us, it's a mechanism of having our examiners be capable of doing more for an applicant to be sure that all the boxes are checked properly, everything has been done right. And we've even set up account managers for some of our largest customers. And they've said it's just been night and day in terms of being able to provide them a service where if they have a question about something and they don't know what to do, they know who they can call to get the answer.
All of us. And every day we struggle with that, right? Getting in touch with somebody who can actually really help you and not just talking to a robot, which with AI, maybe who knows you will never talk to a real person again. So, but I do think the personal touch and having somebody to turn to makes all the sense in the world. And so I've always thought it's interesting that WIPO seems to treat others like their customers and that you're trying to give them good service. Doesn't feel to me like that's a UN agency or any kind of government agency, really.
Well, good point. The WIPO is the technical arm of the UN, but we are fee service, so we are similar to the USPTO, where our fees are really our income, right? We don't rely on the member states like many of the other UN organizations have to rely on the income from the member states. That's not true for WIPO. So it makes us very different, and it allows us to be more forward-thinking. Where we want to change the culture, we can. Where we want to evolve our systems, we just simply go do it. So yes, we are very different from other UN organizations. We also have a very strong governance. So, our income comes in, we know what to do with it, we know what the programs are. And by the way, our programs and all the work that we do has to be approved by the member states. So what we do has already been approved by the member states. So in all the work that we are doing, the programs that we're putting on in developed or developing countries, it's all been approved ahead of time, but it's all, in my mind, has to be customer-centric. We have to know who the customer is, we have to know what they need, and if we don't, we have to go find out, like the legislative assistance. We find out what options do they want, and then we provide that to them.
Yeah. I had the opportunity, as you know, to have this same conversation with Darren a few months ago, and I think I told him I didn't really ever think of WIPO as a UN agency, and he said My memory's correct. He said, well, you took that as a good thing. Because that's the goal, isn't it? And not to say anything bad about other UN agencies, but a lot of them are much more like government kind of focused or government seeming. WIPO is not quite a fee for service, but you're there to help and facilitate what the users want. Because the governments had already said, that's a benefit to us. You get this in order. Then they send it over the transom to us. And it just seems like you play a very different role.
Yeah, and I would probably add to that one of the other differences between WIPO and many of the other UN organizations is when we go into a developing country, for example, and do something with them, we're not giving them money like some of the other UN organizations do. We come in with predefined programs that we want to support them with, and it's either with people or materials or information. And we work with them one-on-one, either with the government or with their inventors, with their various communities. IP and gender is an example. We run a lot of programs in a lot of developing countries, but also developed countries. But we go in with how do we educate women on how IP can be used to help them economically? How do we help girls get into STEM? And with the women, how do you help them understand that IP is their growth factor, right? If you learn to use IP, you can start to think about your ideas and how do you want to commercialize it? How do you go out and get funding? How do you manufacture? How do you commercialize it and in a way that it's protected once you start to sell your product, either regionally or maybe even internationally?
And I can probably imagine some people are rolling their eyes and say, oh, women in IP, oh, that's just like niche, that's a DEI type thing. And I get that, but I also, from my point of view, and we do a women's IP forum, from my perspective, it's all about making the innovation ecosystem larger. And if we make it larger, we're going to get more innovation. My dad worked in a factory 7 days a week. So I've been lucky. I've worked hard. Renee's father, he was a plumber. For a lot of the people that I grew up with, going down these paths with science and technology and what have you was just not an option. There's all kinds of or marginalized is maybe the way to say it, marginalized communities for whatever reason. Live in an inner city, the schools aren't maybe as great or they're overcrowded or whatever. And with women in STEM, it's a big issue. I think we're making a lot of improvements, certainly in the life sciences area, probably mostly. But if we can get more people innovating and more people understanding it and more people being entrepreneurs and doing startup work, that will just create much more opportunity, economic activity, and the innovation that we say that we really want. So I think it's a very positive thing.
For us, it's anything but DEI in a way. I mean, we work with, let's say, 50 to 100 women at a time, maybe in a developing country. And we don't go in and say, here's IP, here's what you need to do, here's how you have to put it into your business plan. What we do is we start them out with, what are you trying to accomplish here? Do you have a new product, like somebody in South America a woman came out with a completely new roofing material out of rubber? Or somebody in Nigeria or Southeast Asia, and they're coming up with the new cloth, maybe new colors, a trademark or an invention. And we go in with them and we say, tell us what you're trying to accomplish. Give us your idea of the product or service that you want to sell. Then we step back and say, okay, here's how we're going to help you understand the starting point for a strategic plan or a policy. Then we're going to help you learn to figure out how to commercialize it. But all along the way, we're going to stay with you. Could be up to 12 months that we stay with this group of women. Now, I still feel in many cases we're still trying to boil the ocean because you can only reach so many of them at a time.
I know. I describe this sometimes as it feels like sometimes you're shoveling water back into the ocean. And but for or was it Albert Schweitzer said, I think it was him who said, somebody asked him, why are you throwing that starfish back into the water? I mean, there's millions of them here right on this beach. And he said something to the effect, well, it matters to that one. And that's all we can do. We can do, and maybe that's why I really like what you guys do at WIPO, because it's not like output result oriented, it's input oriented. It's helping people forward, helping people up. It's the old, I'm going to teach you how to fish. I'm not going to give you the fish.
Well, when you start with one person and you help them understand how IP can help them personally, economically, suddenly you've helped their entire little community, right? Because that person may go hire some of these people to help manufacture or help commercialize the product. But as soon as you help the community, now you've helped the region in that country. And as soon as you help women in that region, suddenly you see that you're helping them across the country. So yes, you start small and you just keep growing it bit by bit.
Yeah, with momentum. Well, and I think, and not that WIPO has not been good in the past, but I think over the last 5.5 years or so, you kind of really put your foot on the accelerator. I'm a big fan of Darren. I told him that. I tell everybody that. I think he's doing fantastic work. He's infectious. When he talks about things that matter to him, you can't help but get excited. And I think that probably also helps an awful lot. So maybe we can just pivot a little bit to talk about during your time, because you went into WIPO with Darren. Darren's the director, you're a deputy director. What are you, Lisa, not Darren, what are you, Lisa, most proud that you guys have been able to accomplish over the last 5.5 years?
That's a great question. And first of all, I'm going to say I love working for Darren because he is very forward thinking. We think a lot alike in many ways. So when he asks me to go do something, it's like, oh, yes, this is great. Let's go get it done. One of the things, there's a lot of things that I'm very proud of that we've done over the last 5.5 years. One is to really start getting AI into operations and into translation. If I just take translation as an example, we've done what we called a virtual translation agency. We've created it so that we can have a test environment to use the translation or AI in the translation environment. We've gone in the last 3 months with certain translation pairs, let's say Japanese to English or French to English or English to French, in the abstracts and in certain WOSAs, the written opinions. We've translated them using AI, and we've gone from a cost of around 56,000 Swiss francs to $175.
Oh, my.
Think about whether or not, as soon as we can figure out, let's say, German to English. German's very difficult to translate by AI, so we're working in test environments to figure out how we can best do this. But think about all 10 PCT languages being able to be translated into English or French, and how much money we can save in doing that. At the same time, we saw the quality go up, which amazed us that the quality using AI could go up. So we're in a really good situation with that right now. We're also working on our strategic plan for marketing. We'll have our first strategic plan out probably, I would say, by the end of April. But we've been working on this for over a year. How do we educate the people inside WIPO on customer centricity, making them the center of everything that we do? How do we figure out how to be best with them prior to the filing of a PCT application versus great customer service that we already have post-filing of a patent application or a PCT application? Everything there from also adding account managers. We've now gone to hiring consultants in some of the bigger countries. We have one now in Japan, one in Korea, one in China, and we just announced or posted an opening for our first one for the U.S. These are people that will work with us to reach out to primarily the largest underusers or the largest non-users of the PCT, so we can talk with them and find out why. The example I give is we went to a very large company in Japan who's filing a lot of Paris Convention applications, and we didn't really understand why they weren't using PCT at all, because we saw that they were filing a lot of their inventions in more than 3 countries. So the cost benefit should have been very favorable to filing the PCT route. When we met with them, they said, oh, we thought the PCT meant ABC, whatever. They had a misunderstanding of one aspect of the PCT. So now they've gone from filing 150 PCT applications a year. This year they think they're going to be filing close to 600.
That's a big change.
It's huge. And it's a mindset change for us. It's a culture change. So we're working on that.
Well, I'm a big fan of the PCT, and I think, and I don't want to drag you into a conversation about what's going on in America and the laws and stuff. That I realize that would be inappropriate. But what I would look at what's going on in America if I was a chief IP counsel or even a CFO or a CEO and trying to give directions to the people that work for me, I wouldn't abandon the U.S. because you just can't. I mean, no, that's silly. That's silly talk. But I think having a PCT filing that gives you 30 months, and I also think there are, and this is going to upset the pro-patent people in the audience, I'm going to say it anyway, I think corporations file too many applications on too many things that even when you're filing it, you should know this is not going to lead to anything. And you file it for a variety of different reasons. And then people say, oh, well, PCT, that's an expense and so forth. The benefit you get out of PCT, and if you're going to file globally, it's not more expensive. It is cheaper. And on top of that, the amount of extra time that you get, that gives you all kinds of strategic opportunities. Because even today, if I file something that I think has got guaranteed to be successful, 30 months from now, it may not be. And it may not be for no reason related to the innovation itself. Somebody else may have come up with something better that's a paradigm shift. You just never know. So that 30 months is so critically important. And I don't think people really understand it. I mean, they understand it. Maybe it's just that until you get into the game and you get into playing it and see how it actually helps you in the long run, it's hard to believe, I guess. I don't know. I mean, do you see people like that don't understand the strategic choices that will be available to them until they really jump in?
Well, I think there is some truth to that. But I think we're also seeing people become a little more strategic in their thinking, but that doesn't rule out PCT.
No, I think it actually means you should be doing
right.
PCT. And
when you see things today like changes in where products are going to be manufactured, maybe because of the tariffs or the trade issues, we met with one organization or one industry organization, and we had a long discussion with them about, let's say today you're trying to build a bicycle. You get your tires from one country, you get your gears from another country, you get the frame from another country, and up to today that was fine. But maybe with tariffs and trade issues, you're going to say, I need everything being built down the street from each other, so I can bring everything in to just assemble it in one location. Well, I think we're going to see some of that on a bigger scale and say some countries that weren't manufacturing before may start manufacturing certain things. You may try to sell into other countries that maybe you weren't selling into before. And what we talked about with the industry is to say, look, you've got to tell your IP counsel what you're seeing happen, what you need to see happen, and let them be a part of the decision-making process on where you should be filing patent applications.
Yeah, and I think people were already starting to think about that before President Trump came out with these tariff rules, and I think now other countries may be looking at the situation as well, and people are at least talking about all of these things. I thought they should have been talking about it a couple years earlier with COVID, because I drive a Ford F-150, and my truck was not affected, but there was a period of time when Ford had like acres of trucks just sitting there because the chip that they needed, they couldn't get out of, I think it was Vietnam, because of the COVID restrictions, or there had been an outbreak or what have you, and everything just comes to, so you have a $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 if it's a Raptor version of the Ford F-150 just sitting there because of a $20 chip or $25 chip that you can't get out of Vietnam. And if I was the CEO, I would have found that completely unacceptable. And I think people were already starting to ask those questions about the supply chain. And you have to have redundancy. I'm not saying don't have redundancy, but like any chain, the weakest point is going to be the weakest link, and you could have the strongest chain everywhere else. And then you add the tariff thing onto that, and then I think people kind of say, okay, well, we really need now to look at this. And what a benefit it would have been to have had 30 months filing, and now you can still pivot, right? Because did you get a chance to meet Dean Giebel at Live?
No, I didn't.
So Dean is Chief Patent Counsel for Samtec, and he has been saying recently, and maybe this is well known, but it was not well known to me. I don't think it was well known to other patent people either, that wherever textile manufacturing goes, wherever it goes next, within the next decade, that's where you're going to start to see higher tech manufacturing. So you have to chase that. Well, how can you chase that if you're just doing only domestic filings? I mean, it makes it much harder to know and have the ability to pivot. And yeah, I realize 30 months isn't forever, but in our space, that's a huge amount of time. And I do think it gives you a lot more strategic opportunity, because I fundamentally think most companies need to abandon more applications than they do. If it's not a part of your business, say something to your patent team and say, stop doing that. And your patent team, if the examiners aren't going to give you what you need for it to be useful, say, okay, well, we tried. Or, appeal it. Don't just keep going back and back and back. And I think there's a lot of money out there that just gets wasted.
Well, I think that's true. But I think now, with a lot of things that are happening in the marketplace, the economics of it, you will see companies start to pivot more. And that 30 months may become very important to them in trying to help them decide where to pivot to, where to get out of.
I'm a big fan of the PCT, and I think it's seems to be running better than ever. Is that fair to say?
We're very excited about a lot of things that are happening right now in the PCT. With the upskill of our staff, getting them to a point where they can do more than what they've done in the past. They're all very excited. It's kind of a culture shift for them, a mindset change. But they seem to be very, very happy with it. And you get more production out of both the tools and the people when you have a really good working environment.
Yeah, great. So now it's probably going to come as not a shock to anybody who's been paying attention to WIPO, because Darren has cleared the first hurdle. And there was only one other person who ran against him. And not to say anything bad about that person, because I think it's wise. Put your name in the ring. Like Todd, again, always used to say, you got to be present. So I think if you want to be involved, get involved. But I think with Darren's success and where he is in his career, it was a pretty easy choice for the members to want Darren again. And it's not official, but he's cleared the first hurdle, and then it will become official once he gets ratified by the whole membership, right?
Right, on April 21.
April 21. So that is going to happen. It would be a massive shock if that doesn't happen. So Darren is going to get another 6 years starting in September, right? So his first term runs
Correct.
out. Okay.
On October 1. He'll start October 1.
So what do you see WIPO doing in, say, the last 6 months of Darren's first term and into his second term? Where do you think the organization's going to go and focus?
That's a really interesting question for just the last 6 months. I think he's going to be looking at where does he take the organization for the next 6 years after the end of September.
See, that's the benefit of knowing this, right? Because
Right.
now he can start to pivot his second term is almost like 6.5 years now, right?
Correct.
And that's a good place to be, because otherwise you'd be kind of winding up over the next 6 months. And not to say WIPO would stop and the good people that work there would continue the work, but I don't know that people realize when you put the head of an organization on a timeline, it really doesn't help.
Well, 6 years is a fairly long time to be in a role like this. Some of the other UN organizations, or take, for example, the WTO, they don't have 6 years. I think ITU is a 4-year term. WTO is either 4 or 5 year term. So 6 years at WIPO is a fairly lengthy amount of time. But with that said, so many of the things that Darren has put into place, especially around things like the culture change, the updated HR systems, the updated IT systems, you don't want things to slip back the way they were before. Right? So giving a second 6-year term is going to really be able to allow Darren to make sure that the things that he's been trying to work on, the things that people have seen are really good improvements to WIPO, will continue.
I get 6 years is a long time, but I think it's probably the right length of time. I mean, particularly the way the world is getting more and more complicated. And I just look at the U.S., and not saying anything about Republican or Democrat, but when you change an administration, and all the people and all the jobs and all the roles that you need to fill. And in our space, often the director doesn't get in. Like Andre, he had less than 3 years.
Right.
John Squires is going to have just over 3 years,
right.
you know, and you got to learn the lay of the land, and that takes time. And you got to people working for you need to know who you are, and you need to know who they are and what they can do, and that constant changing doesn't let, in a very complicated world, I think you work on big things.
Well, I think that's true, but if you look at WIPO itself, you have to learn WIPO first, and then you have to learn the UN, and the UN systems are not always that easy to learn. And it can still take a long time to get things done, even when you have people who are, let's really make this happen,
Absolutely.
Let's get it moving forward quickly. It can still take a while.
It does. It can take a while, and if you don't get going, and you only have a limited amount of time. So I do think that this is a good time for WIPO. And I guess, you know, if you have somebody that's in there that's not really doing the job, you'd like to get them out earlier. But right now in this space, we have somebody and a team of people under Darren that I think are doing things really well. So I'm personally excited that this is going to just give him another 6.5 years from now.
And he's had an incredible senior staff team that get along really well with each other, which has helped with an area that he's very passionate about is cross-sector work. So what we do in the patents and technology sector, we need to work across with the regional national development people, or we need to work with the Madrid or the Hague people. And the cross-sector work under Darren has just flourished.
What initiatives do you think we're going to see over the next 6.5 years? Are there anything on that you can preview? I know there's some stuff you got going on that you can't say anything about, right? That's not mature enough for the public. But what do you see on the horizon that is mature enough or real enough that you could, you know, give us a preview of?
Well, one really important area for both Darren and for the registries, as well as a few other areas, is the future growth of the WIPO services that we provide. If we look just at PCT, for example, we'll have the strategic plan for a marketing plan to help promote the PCT around the world in ways that we've never promoted it before. Historically, there was always growth in the PCT, so we didn't need to go out and really promote it the way we want to see people use the PCT. The same thing is true for Madrid, for Hague, for IP enforcement, for ADR. We really want to get out there and say, here we are, tell us how we can help you. So Darren has put together a couple of things. One is the Future Growth Task Force, to which the PCT, Madrid, and Hague fit under that to help us figure out how to really promote the services better. But he's also put together a future, I don't remember exactly what he calls it, but it's a futures, it's not really a task force, it's a new division where they're looking at the trends. Where do we see IP going in the future? Where do we see the trends of what's happening around the world? And how do we bring that knowledge back into WIPO to help us across all of the different products and services that we provide?
And are you looking at that future footprint with an eye towards how are we going to advise countries that come to us for help? Because it seems like we're at this moment in time where changes over the next 5-6 years could be enormous. Just AI, for example. It would seem to me that an organization like WIPO has to almost have a bunch of futurists on staff who are technologists as well, so that you can kind of envision the world, so you can kind of be ready and prepared for the questions you're going to be getting.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to put it, Gene. We do have some futurists, as you call them, on staff. They are technologists, or they have a lot of experience with different types of economies. We also have our economics division, and all of the people put together will help us understand where we think the trends are going. So you're right that AI is really the trend today, and we need to figure out how to help IP offices learn to use AI. We need to help inside the PCT, for example, where we want to put in AI in operations and examination from end to end, or AI in translation, or AI in research, data research. AI is just one of them, though. right? We don't know where we're going to be going in the next 6 years in any definitive way. So we do need the people who are going to say, hey, what about finance? What about various other areas? How do we make sure that we stay on top of this so we bring all that knowledge back into WIPO in wherever we need to within WIPO to make it a part of our programming?
It seems like it's got to be exciting because not only are you dealing with all these different technologies, not only are you dealing with all of these different cultures and countries and languages, but you're dealing with it through the lens of innovation. And to some extent, that seems, like 1 + 1 = 2 in every language. So that's the commonality that's bringing everybody together. It seems like for a nerd like we all are in the patent space, let's face it, we're all nerds. That's got to be exciting.
It is really exciting, and it's one of the main reasons why so many people like working at WIPO, and under Darren Tang even, because Darren is very future thinking. He really wants to take WIPO to the next level, but not just to the next level. He wants to keep it going again and again and again over the years that he'll be in charge there.
So you don't have to say anything about this if you don't want. What I will say is WIPO has not always been like that. There have not always been people happy to be working at WIPO. They believe in the mission, so they keep doing it. And the WIPO mission has always been a good one, in my estimation. There have been times when WIPO has had a little bit of a checkered history, and it's just refreshing to see that everybody enjoys being there. It seems like everybody I know likes the people they work with, and that is always helpful. And then what you're doing really matters.
Well, I've always said that the people that I work with at WIPO are just some of the best people in the world, both from just the culture of working at WIPO, but also their skill sets. You wouldn't believe how many PhDs we have, or people can speak 4 or 5 or 6 different languages. And it's just absolutely amazing to see us all come together and mesh as a team.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else that you want to share with us while I have you here that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell us about what's going on now at WIPO or what might be going on in the future? I mean, one thing that comes to mind is standard essential patents. That's a specific area of interest to me that I know WIPO has started getting more, what looks to me like more involved in. Is that going to be a trend, or was that, this is hot, we're going to do what we can, put it out there, and then wait and hear what people want, or is this a path that WIPO is going to continue on?
Yeah, so specifically with respect to the standard essential patents, this is something that's going to continue for a long time to come. We've started the conversation. We're not there to dictate what people should or shouldn't do between implementers or patent owners, but we want to have the conversation with them on both sides of the aisles, so to speak. But some of the things we're doing, for example, is you probably are familiar with PatentScope, our big database of all of our patents. We are working with certain SDOs, the standard development organizations like ETSI, IEEE, and ITU to start. And we're getting their data on what they consider to be the essential patents for each of their various standards that they are working with. And we're getting that data and we're putting it into PatentScope, so that if you do a patent search, you can see a button and click on it and say, well, somebody claims that this is part of this standard development organizations with respect to, let's say, 5G, 6G, whatever it may be. And we're getting these companies to help us put their data into our PatentScope, not so that we can simply create a whole new database, but it's an aggregation in one-stop shop. Where we can bring all this data in. Now, the next step, in addition to working with other SDOs, we've started working with the patent pool organizations like CISVEL, where they have verified certain patents to be essential to a standard. Whether you agree or not is a different issue. It's something that they say, we've looked at it, we think it's an essential patent, and we're bringing that data now into the PatentScope. In CISVEL, we started with about a month ago. VIA licensing will be the next one that we are working with right now, and that should be in Q2, where we have their data inside PatentScope. And we're working with others as well. So that's one area. We're also doing a lot more in ADR, or the area of mediation, with the FRAND issues, the SCP and FRAND issues. We've got a new program where we have an IoT SME type commitment from certain corporations, the large patent holders, to say, we will agree to mediation before we ever consider litigation with the small SMEs or IoT and the Internet of Things SMEs, and say, find a way to see if there's a way to resolve any issues through mediation first. And they'll do it in a way that says open transparency, a commitment not to sue for some period of time, and start to work with them that way. So we've got programs like that that we're also working on in SAPs. But we want this conversation to continue because we're going to come out with, for example, a publication on FRAND. It's not what should the rate be. It is what is FRAND to begin with. How do people look at FRAND? How do they say, well, it ought to be this rate or it ought to be that rate? What are the different methodologies? So we will be putting information like that together as well.
That was what I was going to say, that I think in the SEP space, maybe more so than any other space that I can think of, we need to come out with a common vocabulary. Because just listening to what you were saying about essentiality, I get it. I know what you mean. But if there were some people here, they would argue with you and about what I'm about to say. Because I get, if you're an implementer, not wanting to pay for patents that are not essential to the standard. I get that. Why would I pay for something that is unrelated to what I'm doing? On the other side of that coin is, but by definition, they are standard essential patents because we disclosed them. And the fact that the SDO took a different path doesn't mean that they're not standard essential because we disclosed them. Okay, I get that, but are you really asking somebody to pay for something they're not using? And sometimes I think in the SCP space, more than any other space, people are ships passing in the night. And so the more I think that you guys can do, not having a skin in the game, so to speak, because you just want the conversation to move forward, and we can pick whichever we want, and these countries can do what they want, and the members can do what they want. Hopefully we can come to some common understanding here about who's paying for what and what should they be paying for. I think that's a fundamental problem before we ever get to, okay, well, now that we know what we should be paying for, what are we going to pay for?
Yeah.
How much are we going to pay for it?
No, I agree. And I think that's a part of what we'll be working on, is to come up with some definitions, some terminology, and ways that we can bring the parties together to say at least we understand what we mean by FRAND and what are the different methods or methodologies that are being used to calculate FRAND. And then the parties can get together and have their discussions, maybe through our IoT SME program, wherever it may end up being. But yes, we are working on that. We're also working in other areas like trade secrets, data privacy, areas where we can say, let's have some toolkits, let's have some conversations, let's make sure everybody's working off the same song page as well there.
Yeah, real small areas, trade secrets and data privacy. I mean, my goodness. So that was the one thing that came up at Live. During a patent litigation panel, it turned, because everybody I think probably knows with IPWatchdog panels, what we do is we kind of say, this is what we're going to talk about. And then when it goes live, just follow the conversation. Just go in wherever this conversation goes. And this particular conversation started about patent litigation being adjunct to trade secret litigation and vice versa. And then it turned into a really interesting conversation about trade secrets. So I know we're going to have more of those panels coming up the rest of this year, and I know we'll have more at Live next year because it was really interesting. So that's a big area. But talk about big areas, data privacy. Oh, my God. And not only is it a big area, but what happens in Europe and the way they treat privacy in Europe, very different than how we treat privacy in the U.S. Maybe closer, California is becoming closer to Europe probably, but there's just totally different philosophies on privacy.
It is, and it's kind of a new area for us to start the conversations around, and we want to be sure that the member states want us to be in this sphere. But similar to trade secrets, how do we manage it within, let's even say, the trade secret world? So we'll see where that takes us.
I hope they want you involved in that, because I think WIPO would be a very big voice there. And if people probably in this audience are hearing this or clued into this, but the data privacy is adjunct to AI. I mean, do you have the right to do what you're doing? Had you collect it properly? If you collected it properly and have the right to use it, can you use it for this purpose? And then you're not even getting into some of the stuff that goes on in Europe where the right to be forgotten. Where's that going to play into any of this? Will it? I don't know. Probably.
Well, you also brought up the point about the commonality maybe between data privacy and AI. And maybe we should even be looking at the treaties themselves and how does it treat AI. And we can go down those paths as well in terms of the future of the work that we could be doing to support the member states.
Yeah, and if you could do anything in the U.S. to get them to update the DMCA, because I do think that's sort of, I think what I was hearing you say with the treaties, I think technology has run so far, so fast beyond so many of the laws and so many of the treaties. And for a long time, people think, oh, well, the photocopier, okay, that changes things. Well, the old laws kind of seem to adapt really well to that. The VCRs, the different technologies, the MP3s, and every step of the way, it seemed to, okay, well, maybe it's not a perfect fit, but you can make that square fit in that round hole,
Yes.
I don't know that that's true now anymore with the way the internet has continued to grow and the way AI is going to change everything.
I don't know if I have the answer to that either.
No, who does? But I think the conversation is essential.
It is, and that's the one thing that WIPO really does well at, is bringing the parties together to have the conversations. One other thing I guess I'd also mention is if you have been in a corporation and you are doing mergers or acquisitions, or you're in a law firm and you're supporting a client doing things like mergers and acquisitions, what happens when you need to transfer all those patents from one entity to another? If you end up having to go country by country and doing your assignments, it can be very expensive and very timely, or take a long time rather. We are working on a global assignment program where you would have one single global assignment that you would be able to take from IP office to IP office for anybody who's participating in the program. Now, it's going to take some time because we're right now working on the business use case. We've had 27 IP offices around the world come to us and say, here's what we would want to see you do in a global assignment. But we're working on that, and that should be actually out by the end of the year, the phase one of 3 phases. Next year, we'll be doing a sandbox area where we can test what we want to do, followed by actual implementation of a global assignment.
So that's exciting because, as you know, coming from the corporate world, companies don't know what they own.
Right.
So having a way to streamline this across jurisdictions, across industries, and people could actually really know what they have in their portfolio, I think that would be very worthwhile.
And making it a lot less expensive and easier to manage.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Lisa. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you coming in and speaking to our audience live at IPWatchdog Live. And I look forward to following up with you and WIPO and seeing what winds up happening. So,
thanks, Gene, and it's been a lot of fun to be here.
Thank you for listening to IP Watchdog Unleashed. We will be back next week, and we hope you will join us again. In the meantime, please be sure to visit IPWatchdog.com to read all the latest news and information about what is happening in the intellectual property world. And also be sure to subscribe to our free daily email newsletter.